My name is Jordan Roberts. I am here with Dr. Jeremy Sabo, Sabo the scientist. We met at the gym, and we just started talking a lot about the body and nutrition. And Jeremy here, he knows a lot about that stuff. He did some work for NASA as well as the INL, and recently had a paper published, right, on microgravity.
Microgravity, yeah. So how proteins are regulated when there's no gravitational force, so there's no external pressure that's consistent.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the opposite of exercise, right? It's just pure stagnation, and it's very fitting. Sorry, can you hold your mic? Oh, okay, yeah. So, and that's super fitting for me because I love the idea of exercise, right? Obviously, we met at the gym, so I like talking, I like exercising, and I feel like if everybody knew the rules of the game, right, how your body worked, then it would just be easier to do things that you wanted to do, to have more energy, to have less brain fog, to lose weight easier. So yeah, that's what I'm super excited to talk to you and everyone else about this topic because again, it should be common knowledge.
Perfect. Well, what are some of the rules of the game that you talk about that you kind of want to emphasize on today?
So I think the theme that we can use is your cell is a lot like a city, right? Where the typical image of a cell, you've got this membrane and you've got a nucleus and the mitochondria and all these little organelles. And then the cytoskeleton, which is this constantly growing and shrinking infrastructure, right? So you can think of like the roads outside or the scaffolding of a building. Those remain pretty stable in our time frame, but within a cell, they're constantly being remodeled. Right? It's like having a city that's always doing construction. They put the highway down, and then 2 weeks later, they're changing the highway and putting it somewhere else. Okay. And so this is giving the cell the ability to constantly adapt to its environment. So the cell will then communicate this city with the neighboring city through different proteins. And those proteins can either be a direct city to city, like a highway that goes through, or something like a radio broadcast or an email where it's long distance. And that long distance for the humans or for biology we call like hormones or peptides, things like GLP-1 or insulin or BPC-157, right? These are all long distance communication molecules. So I think when we can understand that the body wants to be able to communicate with itself, cells need to be able to communicate within themselves and to the neighboring cells, and then collections of cells, like an organ, like a liver or a pancreas, need to be able to communicate with the rest of the body. And then you've got other, you could say organs like the vagus nerve, which goes straight from the brain and is connected to multiple organs. And the idea is that you need that good communication. And if you don't have that good communication, bad things arise. You think of any situation where there's been poor communication with a group of people, right? Like everyone's experienced that. So what's happened is most of us know very little about it. But the scientific field is very well versed in how hormones and peptides and these long-distance communication molecules regulate things like fat loss or energy production or growth hormone. And it seems that the majority of our food and the way food is consumed have all been hijacked, right? Okay. So now the normal meal, the normal processes that people go through, there's all these little micro adjustments to make it harder for us to lose that last bit of visceral fat or to actually put on muscle or to start sleeping better. So then people are trying to be healthier, they're doing all the right things, and they just are hitting this wall. So I think learning and understanding how the body wants to communicate to itself makes it easier to make those little decisions throughout the day so that you're changing the trajectory of your cell, of your health, back into your favor. And we can learn from all the shady stuff that the food and farm industry has done and then apply that to what we're going to do and then ultimately get healthier.
Awesome. Yeah. So where do you think most people kind of go wrong when when trying to like say lose weight, for example, because that's kind of a big one that a lot of people are trying to do these days. Our food is honestly too good for us, and not in a tasty way, but I mean in a tasty way, but it's a little bit addictive in a lot of senses.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So where do you think people kind of go wrong in the sense of like, oh, I'm doing everything right. I'm exercising, I'm doing my cardio, like I'm watching my calories, I'm doing all of those things, but I still can't seem to make progress. Where do you think is kind of like the underlying problem for a lot of those things?
Well, I think it's really all of the above, right? So there's progress that can kind of be made just about anywhere. Um, some of my favorites are the stuff that's free, right? You don't really have to change anything money-wise. And I think one of the easiest things to do, there's a gal, I always mispronounce her last name, but she goes by the glucose goddess. Okay. And one thing she really emphasizes is the order of which you eat your food has a huge impact on how your body digests it. Right?
Okay.
So if you eat the fibers and the proteins and then the carbs, what you're doing is you're slowing the glucose and the insulin spike. So that way you start eating and your body will raise insulin, but then it doesn't have to spike it, it can just raise it, and then you can start getting the nutrients out of your vegetables. They can start coating the internal lining. And then the fibers, as well as the proteins and the fats, because if you're eating vegetables, they have a lot of fat-soluble vitamins, so kind of covering them with olive oil is a good idea. And those fats and fibers and proteins all trigger your own GLP-1. They also require a lot of chewing, and because they're still large in size as you're consuming them, they put pressure on your stomach, and the expansion of your stomach causes GLP-1 to be released, right?
Interesting.
So back to this idea of, being in space, there's no pressure, so the cells aren't responding because there's no push. Inside your gut, when it expands, it triggers the release of your own GLP-1, and GLP-1 is the gene that codes for a protein called glucagon. Glucagon's role is to slow digestive release, so it kind of pinches the gut closed, giving your food more time to be digested in the acid and with the enzymes. Enzymes are just protein that cleave certain food types. So proteases cleave proteins. Your amylases can cleave carbohydrates. You have lipases that cleave lipids or fats. And the idea is that you chew your food, and then you put it in the acid of your stomach, and then these enzymes break it down further. So then once it gets into your intestine, you can start absorbing those nutrients because they've been chopped up enough. Mm-hmm. If they're not chopped or digested enough, then you can't get those nutrients out. And GLP-1 is also to help you recognize when you feel full. Hey, there's nutrients on the way. We have nutrients. At some point, we don't want to overeat, so it helps you feel satiated, helps you feel full. So if you can learn how to generate your own GLP-1 at each and every meal, then you don't need to go out and get Ozempic or some other molecule in high doses, because at a high enough amount, it'll tell you you're not hungry at all. But your body still needs energy. It still needs amino acids and proteins to function. Mm-hmm. So if you're not getting it from your diet, yeah, sure, you may burn some fat, but you're also going to liquefy your muscle mass.
Okay.
And I think this is a big area where people start cutting calories, but if they're not getting enough protein in, then they're breaking down their own muscle to get the proteins to turn into amino acids, to turn back into some other protein, to do normal cellular functioning.
That makes sense.
So that's a big, big takeaway is if you're cutting calories, you've got to bring in more protein into your diet if you want to keep your muscle. Mm-hmm. And then consuming protein with every meal, as well as fat, is going to help you produce your own GLP-1. So again, your body's communicating with itself, which is the exact opposite of what happens at a restaurant. You sit down, they give you a sweet, sugary beverage, and then the bread comes out, and then 20 minutes after you've already been souped up with insulin and sugar, then your meal comes. But there's not really much nutrients in sugar, and there's not a whole lot in the bread. It's soft, it's delicious, it falls apart almost immediately, so it's not triggering your body to do the normal things it would want to. So then you start putting the brakes on, and then the meal shows up, and now you need to start putting the gas on. So you're dysregulating communication within your body by consuming the sugar, the carbonated, sugary drinks, and then the bread up front. You should be consuming water with lemon. Lemon can help produce some of your own GLP-1. And then your fats and your proteins, carbohydrates go last. Dessert at the end, pop if you're going to get it. Treat it like a dessert. Get it at the end of your meal. That little adjustment will huge impact on fat storage, particularly your visceral fat.
Interesting. So it does sound like there's kind of an order of operations to what you should be eating and when and stuff like that. So I want to make sure I'm getting this 100% right. So you're saying that the food buildup in the stomach creates a certain amount of pressure, which tells the body that it needs to release GLP-1.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm getting these things right. So if people who drink like carbonated beverages, would that also activate GLP-1 because of like the gases that are being stored in the stomach?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually quite terrifying because when CO2 shows up in your gut, it doesn't raise the pH. It actually lowers it. It keeps it around, pH 2 to 3. But what's happening is CO2, when it gets into an acidic environment, rapidly dissociates. And what that means is that it no longer stays in solution, so it enters the gas phase. So, you burp, right? You drink a beer, you drink a pop, and you burp afterwards. So what's happening is that as that CO2 releases in your gut, before it can come all the way up to burp, it causes an expansion of your gut, which then releases GLP-1, but there's no food, there's no nutrients. So you're telling your body, hey, food's here right now, like my gut just expanded. But then there's no food. So by the time that your food, you place your order, the food comes out, you start to eat, your body's already said, hey, food never showed up, and it's starting to turn those processes off. The food shows up, and now you're needing to turn them back on. So you're already on the downside when you need to ramp it back up.
So it's almost like you're kind of misleading your body in a way.
Yeah, you're lying to it just a little bit. And again, it's just that no one's dying immediately from this, right? It's like a little white lie where it's not entirely harmful, but it's not doing any good. And this sort of theme happens over and over and over, right? Artificial sweeteners. You're telling your taste buds sugar's on the way. So your body prepares for sugar, for energy, and to do that, it has to release insulin. It has to break proteins down to make new proteins that respond to having sugar present. And it starts doing all this work, and it's like, hey, payday's tomorrow. No, sorry, payday's going to be next week. You're like, I already made the investment.
Budgeted for this.
I'm already here, and now it's not here. So the body begins responding to this sort of broken communication. So you drink pop, signal GLP-1, it's burping, and then the food doesn't show up for a while. Okay. Artificial sweeteners, the sugar didn't show up. Okay. All these petroleum byproducts that they put into our food that stimulate all of our taste buds, ones that are specific to certain nutrients, your body starts getting ready for those, and then they never show up. So what happens is the cell has all of these proteins on the surface that respond to the environment. Insulin, glucagon, bind to the outside of the cell and communicate to the inside, hey, this is what's happening, let's prepare. So to mitigate being lied to all the time, the cell will reduce the number of receptors on the cell membrane. So now you need more insulin to get the same signal across. So artificial sweeteners and the carbonation and all these fake things that are in our food that are making it so delicious and desirable are having this negative feedback and making us less sensitive to communication. We're developing this insulin resistance and all these other communication barriers.
Hormone issues.
Hormone issues, yeah, because we're lying to ourselves. And you know, all the plastics that are in our foods and clothing and everything else, they mimic estrogen. So now our body thinks that we've got all this estrogen, so it's trying to respond accordingly, but it's not from our diet or from an internally controlled thing. We're just dumping these mimetics in. And
Sorry, what are mimetics?
a mimetic, so something that's mimicking.
Oh,
something
okay,
else,
okay,
right?
okay, sorry.
So like an artificial sweetener, it's not sugar, but it's a mimetic. It looks enough like sugar that when it binds to the receptor, it says,
tastes like
hey,
sugar,
it tastes like sugar. And then it gets in, and depending on the sugar, it'll have different breakdown products, right? Some turn into formaldehyde. Some just become different amino acids and other metabolic byproducts. There's a whole realm of looking at how these artificial sweeteners affect our microbial community. And that's where it starts to get terrifying. But most of what you see on mainstream news is, we put these artificial sweeteners in and your human cells are just fine. They break down into things that are no big deal. Well, you look at the gut microbiome and you're like, oh, that's who's suffering. So yeah, you talk about IBS or other gut issues and the artificial sweeteners, there's definitely something happening.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. So the hack, right? If you eat something that's got an artificial sweetener in it, just keep dried fruit or something that's sweet around, and then you have a fig, have a date, have something that's sweet with your artificial sweetener or whatever. It's best to completely cut it out naturally. You don't want to lie to yourself. I don't want you to lie to me. I don't want to lie to you. But our food is designed to lie to us in little ways, so we want to eat more of it. We want to, or we end up craving more of it. So to overcome that illusion, just consume something really small that's sweet, a little piece of chocolate or something, and that way you're still getting some sugar in, so you're not wrecking that communication through your body.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like it's hey, you need to cut out sugar or you need to cut out fat or you need to cut out whatever. It's more of, hey, maybe you should take it, but take it at certain limited amounts and then take it at certain times when you're having other things.
Yeah. So there's definitely, humans are pretty resilient yet squishy, right?
Yes.
Humans can do some amazing things. And you look at like big bodybuilders or, gold medals and anything. And if you really get your diet and your activity just right, humans can do some amazing stuff, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or spiritual, right? But most of us aren't fighting for a gold medal, right? And it makes it difficult to completely move away from traditions, right? You go to other countries and they eat certain foods. You go somewhere where they're eating a small amount of fermented food with every single meal. That's awesome, but it's part of the culture. We don't do that here in the States, right? So we're going to carry some sauerkraut in your pocket, and everyone's going to be like, oh, what is that, But if we can find the little things that we can make adjustments that are easy to adjust the cultural norm, then I think when someone starts making those bigger changes, it'll be easier for them, and then we can get some momentum. And ultimately, any of us that have children, we're kind of setting them up for failure by not teaching them these things, right? By not, I always thought when I grow up, I'm going to have dessert first. And now I'm like, oh, I understand why you don't have dessert first, right?
Yeah.
Like it tastes good and it's awesome, but then you start putting on weight. And you start putting on weight because you're breaking the communication pathway. When insulin shows up, it says stop using fats and proteins as energy, only use sugar. And that's because the sugar actually causes damage at high concentrations. Think about this. If you go get your blood work done, and you look at your 3-month average, your A1C, it's a statement of how much sugar you've consumed over the last 3 months. They know that because the blood cell has a 3-month life cycle. And when sugar gets to a high enough concentration, it will bind to the blood cell, and it stays there for the rest of the blood cell's life. It never leaves. So that's how we know how much sugar you've had over the past 3 months, is because the sugar binds to the blood cell and just stays there. Sugar's got this little oxygen, it's got a negative charge. So anyone that's played with magnets, the negative charge loves positive charge, finds a positive charge in the blood, binds to it, makes a bond, stays there. That same thing happens inside of all of your circulatory system, so all of your veins. Too much sugar will cause damage to your veins. That damage can then lead to buildup. You get calcium, you get other fats, you get plaques, and things that start to build up, and then you have constriction. Until a couple of years ago, we were like, oh, cholesterol is the cause of all this stuff. Cholesterol is just a small molecule that floats around through our body all the time and was at the scene of the crime, so got a bad rap. Cholesterol is actually there to help begin the repairing process due to the damage caused by sugar. And this really makes sense when you scale back, because outside of maple syrup, molasses, honey, there's no other easy, accessible sugar. Everything else, you had to eat the whole fruit or eat something else and slowly break down that sugar. But today, we've spent millions of dollars genetically modifying crops, spraying poison on those crops. So now we can extract out the sugar cane, we can extract out the corn syrup. So now we have raw processed fructose and sugar that we can add into everything. And it's easy energy, which is great. You eat berries. Like a bear eats lots and lots and lots of berries, and it turns off the GLP-1, the signaling, so it can 3D print fat before hibernation. But humans don't hibernate. What do we do when it gets cold outside? We have Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we all feast like monsters.
Yeah.
Right? We do the opposite of fasting. So, it's just hijacking the system. So, yeah.
Okay, so kind of jumping back to this whole order of operation thing, and maybe creating like a little bit of a culture where we're not carrying sauerkraut in our pocket, but we could be doing things like adding lemon to water, as you said.
Yeah.
What are some other things that kind of fall within that same category?
Another really easy one is vinegar.
Vinegar and water.
Vinegar. Well,
okay. Or just vinegar in general.
You could. I mean, putting a little like apple cider vinegar in water, right? It's got a flavor to it, but that's great. It's less practical if you're going out and about to a restaurant, but at home you can definitely do it.
Okay, and let me just ask you this: so, doing these things doesn't trigger GLP-1; it builds GLP-1, or does it trigger GLP-1?
So some compounds, like bitter, helps your body release more GLP-1 to make you feel full.
Okay,
right?
so it would help release.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lemon is more on the lemon, and like bitter melon and these other and certain other herbs will increase gene expression of GLP-1.
And what does that mean?
So in your city, in your cell, you've got a factory called the nucleus, and that's grandma's cookbook. It's got the recipe to how to build everything. And we can open up certain pages, make copies, that's our mRNA, and then those copies, that's our gene expression. We've now made more of those copies.
Okay.
Now, those copies can become proteins. The general theory is you take DNA, you make your copies, you get your mRNA, and then that becomes proteins. What we're realizing in the field of epigenetics is that there's layers at every single step to control how much of that gene expression actually gets turned into a protein. And even once it's a protein, you can degrade it. So just because you have a gene for something doesn't mean you're going to express the symptom of it.
It has to be triggered.
Well, yeah, so you have to have access to it.
Okay.
Think you've got 3 feet of DNA wrapped up in every one of your cells. It's so small you can't see it without a microscope. Most of that DNA is not accessible to make a copy of. So first it has to be accessible. Once it's accessible, if it has a methylation marker on it, you can't read it anyways. So it's accessible, but you can't get into it. It's got a lock on it. So you're only reading the things that you have access to that don't have a lock on it. So then you make a copy of it. Once you make a copy of it, you have to put a little cap and a tail on it to then move it outside of the nucleus to turn it into a protein. And that whole process is regulated as well. There's things called RNAi, or RNA interference.
Okay.
And they will bind to your copies, your RNA, and then it'll break it down. So it never even gets a chance to become a protein. So just because the gene is there or you're turning expression on, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to become a protein, but it's pushing it in the right direction. And this makes a lot of sense, right? Here we go. One way to trigger your own GLP-1 production is to consume something bitter. Now, the reason this works is because most bitter things are associated with toxins.
Okay.
So if you're out in the wild and you eat something and you're like, oh, that's good. I'm starving. I don't know what this is. We just stumbled upon it. We need to eat. So I'm going to start eating some of it. That bitterness that's associated with a toxin is going to turn on multiple pathways in your body so it can communicate to itself to prevent you from dying, right? It increases the amount of saliva you produce and increases the amount of enzymes that you make to potentially break down anything that could be toxic. Next, it increases GLP-1 to make you feel satiated, make you feel full, so you don't eat too much to where that toxin is now past a threshold.
Yes.
It increases your acid production in your gut. And in addition with the GLP-1, it helps close your gut so it has more time to be in the acid and the digestive enzyme environment. And a lot of this is also triggering your vagus nerve, which is that rest or digest. So now you eat it and then you don't feel like running around and frolicking and, hey, look, I found these berries. You eat it and you're like, I think I'm going to sit here. Because now your body can take the energy that it was putting towards running around, stress, and it can focus that on digesting the food. And then once that toxin is broken down, then, hey, maybe you're okay. Look, you didn't die. Mm-hmm. So we now, today, don't normally stumble across random foods and eat it, right? It's going to be 2026, just around the corner. Most people go to the store or grow herbs or stuff like that. So we can use this mechanism that was built in to keep us alive to help regulate our own GLP-1 production by consuming bitter foods. So things like lemon, like vinegar, arugula, right? The angry lettuce, it's got some bitterness to it. Mm-hmm. By eating those, you're actually turning on this pathway to better break your food down, to make you feel more satiated, which in turn helps you digest the rest of your food and prepare your body for consumption, for food. And then, the vinegar is super helpful. Another fun hack is if you're like a sandwich shop, they usually put a pickle on the side. Mm-hmm. Eat the pickle first. The pickle has vinegar. That vinegar is going to help turn on those pathways to slow that insulin spike and better support health, so you're not just converting tons of food directly into fat.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. On kind of a side tangent, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, some people I know that are just pickle connoisseurs, they just absolutely love pickles all the time. They're actually some of like the thinnest people I know. I wonder, and maybe there's a link there, maybe there's not, but I just
so vinegar definitely plays a strong role with supporting a healthy gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. Your gut consumes fibers and different nutrients and produces organic acids and vinegar-like compounds for communication. Mm-hmm. Right? In your lower intestine, you make a lot of butyric acid.
What kind of acid?
It's called butyric acid.
Butyric acid.
And it's used, the fancy term is quorum sensing, which is just bacteria talking to each other via chemicals. Mm-hmm. The same thing we do, right? Like glucagon, GLP-1, it's just the protein. Testosterone, it's a hormone. But it's just the ways that our cells are talking to each other with a chemical. We just learned that bacteria do it in our gut, and they've got their whole language that's unique to them. But they produce things that influence our human cells. One of my favorites is actually pomegranate. So a compound in pomegranate juice gets consumed by certain gut bacteria. The most popular one that I'm familiar with is called Akkermansia. And it consumes the pomegranate compound, and then its metabolic product that it makes is called urolithin A. Urolithin A happens to enter into our human cells, go into the mitochondria, and drive autophagy, which is spring cleaning.
Right.
So consuming pomegranate juice through the pathway of multiple communication steps involving bacteria and us and our circulation gets into our mitochondria and makes our mitochondria more efficient, better at doing what they do. And I think this is a really important thing to note, is that every single ingredient in every single food has some biochemical pathway that it can flow through, sometimes more than one. And it can be consumed and turned into something else by our human cells or our gut bacteria, and that influences what's happening in our body. So to me, digestion is a very expensive activity. And we treat digestion like it's just some casual thing that we expect our body to do, and it's just going to do it, and then we don't have to think about it. And for the most part, yeah, you feed and water yourself, and you move a little, and things tend to work fine. Until the system starts to break, and it doesn't work fine. And then you've got this big push to eat more food so people can make money, and then that food's causing issues, so then you take prescription drugs so someone makes money, and then the prescription drugs prevent you from getting the nutrients from the real food that you're eating, so you just become a lifelong customer for someone else. So we've got to break that system. And the way we do that is by realizing that every single thing that we eat does something to our body, and that digestion is expensive.
It has an opportunity cost.
Yes, it has an opportunity cost. And this is one of the biggest problems with snacking, right? When you wake up in the morning, you've got about 5 grams of sugar circulating through your body. That's what your body wants. It's pulling in fats and it's pulling in amino acids into the mitochondria, and then the mitochondria is converting those back into glucose. It's called gluconeogenesis.
Okay.
Most medical schools, if they teach nutrition at all, or undergraduate biochemistry degrees like I had, teach it the other way, where glucose is like big pimpin', and glucose comes in, and it goes through all these steps, and it gets converted into this compound called pyruvate, and then it enters the mitochondria, and then there's all these steps that it does with the glucose. Oh, and by the way, you can also use fats and amino acids. It's the end of the semester, nobody cares anymore, and we're done. But when you take away food, the body says, oh, we're going to focus on the mitochondria, and we're going to generate the sugar that we need. Because your brain does prefer to have glucose instead of ketones. But you can make it yourself. There is no essential carbohydrate. Essential amino acids for protein, essential fatty acids, and minerals are the only things that your body requires.
Interesting.
There's no essential carbohydrate. They're just tasty.
Yeah.
Right? So this idea of your body wants to be in a state of ketosis. And if you're going to have a scare, right? There's the need to do something where cortisol is involved, right? You're stressed. Then your liver is going to dump a bunch of glucose into your circulation, which is going to spike insulin, and that energy from glucose can now be used to help you do whatever it is that you need to do in response to the stressor.
Okay.
So think about this communication aspect. Your body wants to be relaxed, where you have very little stress hormone. And consuming sugar regularly is now giving you this roller coaster of insulin. Sugar, insulin, sugar, insulin. You're just doing this thing all day long. So your body doesn't have time to just turn off metabolism and just do the things that it wants to do with the cell. You've got a whole city, and you're constantly having a big event, lots of sugar, lots of sugar, lots of sugar. It can't do all the things it needs to be done because you're constantly throwing some event and you're telling it, hey, you need to be active, hey, you need to be active. And this really comes into play because your visceral fat has more receptors for stress hormone than other cells do. And that's why it's so hard to get rid of that visceral fat at the very end that's wrapped around your organs. You can run all day long, you can exercise, you can be calorie deficient, but all of those also trigger stress and cortisol. Excessive running, overtraining, doesn't matter how big and buff you are and how great your diet is, if you're overtraining or you're in this extreme calorie deficient, your body is producing cortisol, stress hormone. And the visceral fat cells have 2 to 3 times more receptors for that stress hormone. So then every time that cortisol comes up and your body starts releasing that glucose, your fat cells, which are right next, right, they're all localized right here, once it gets released, those visceral fat cells are the first to grab it up. And then as they cause the visceral fat will release compounds to drive stress. Stress causes glucose to be released. Then insulin comes up to pull it in. And because insulin's there, it turns off fat burning. So you're not going to break down any of that visceral fat.
Right. If sugar's in the system, you can't burn fat.
You can't burn fat. Yeah. Insulin is this master regulator that puts a pause on breaking down fat. Mm-hmm. So the fix to this, learn how to relax, right? You're going to go work out. Find a source of oxytocin. Pet your dog. Hang out with your partner. Do something that makes you feel loved and connected, because as oxytocin increases,
cortisol
diminishes.
Right.
And as long as you have high cortisol, you're never going to get rid of that visceral fat. So instead of being in a long-term calorie deficiency, you can do like a 1-day fast, just like a 24-hour fast once a week. And then as long as you're getting enough protein in, then you're not going to break down your protein. So the energy that your body's going to pull from is going to be fat. And if you can, because now you're removing that stress of being in an every single day calorie deficiency. And then, as long as you're fasting day, you're not too stressed. Avoid being hangry, I guess.
Right.
Then now you're going to start whittling into that visceral fat.
Okay. Well, so I have a question for you, and this is just because I know next to nothing on these things. I just find them fascinating. But the vagus nerve plays an important role in cortisol levels, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you, so with oxytocin being released, we know that the more oxytocin that's in the body, that diminishes the levels of cortisol. But do we also need to stimulate the vagus nerve somehow?
Yeah, so stimulating the vagus nerve helps the long-term communication, or the long-distance communication, switch from fight or flight to rest and digest.
Right.
So when you're all amped up, your body is producing things like ghrelin, which tells you that you're hungry, and is also like stimulating growth hormone, and potentially adrenaline, or in your brain, norepinephrine. And so you're going. And that's also where like the cortisol and stuff is present, right? The idea is you wake up in the morning, cortisol is high.
Right.
Cortisol drove you to release glucose into the body, spiked insulin, and that helps you wake up, get you going in the morning. And the idea is that it's supposed to dwindle down throughout the day. And then you've got this natural kind of circadian rhythm throughout the day, right? You get the sunshine in your eye, which looks like it's about to hit you.
Just a little bit.
Get that nice glow.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's December and the sun's still out and there's like almost no snow. Like I know some people are upset about it, but I love sunshine.
No, so. I'm okay with it. Yeah. The fact that we did not have a white Christmas is okay with me in Idaho. So
every time I see the sun, I'm like, yes, it's out, jackpot.
Yeah.
So you want to have this natural circadian rhythm, and the idea is cortisol high first thing in the day, right? And then you want it to dwindle. But we've kind of hijacked that system when you're stressed throughout the day, right? there's all sorts of reasons to be mentally stressed, psychologically stressed.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're lying to yourself and you're eating foods that say nutrients are on the way and then they don't actually show up, that's creating cellular stress. Eating foods that don't support your mitochondria create stress. So this is something I'd like to touch on later. The mitochondria is really the source of most reactive oxygen species.
Mm-hmm.
The reason you want to eat your antioxidants is to quench these angry oxygens, these reactive oxygen species in the mitochondria.
Right.
So
free radicals,
free
right?
radicals.
That's what they're
Yeah,
called?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's multiple names for it. In essence, it's an oxygen that has some extra electrons, and it's got a negative charge.
Yeah.
So if you take a magnet with the negative end pointing out and you move it around, the second it finds something it can bind to, it's going to. And when it does, it imparts energy, and that can cause destruction of cell membranes. It can break DNA. It can cause issues to whatever biological component just had an oxygen slam into it.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that causes oxidative stress on like the important organs, right? If you have like free radicals floating around in the brains, per se, right? That can cause oxidation of the brain, which causes breakdown in the brain cells, right?
Yeah, it really anything
Anything
anywhere
important.
that there's a mitochondria,
Okay.
it can produce reactive oxygen species. Those will oxidize or react with other things in the cell and cause damage.
Yeah.
Right?
For people watching this, could you explain to them what oxidize means? I when I hear the term oxidize, I think of like metal rusting almost.
Yeah, that's in essence what it is. Right?
Okay,
so
okay.
you can think of your red blood cells are constantly going through a redox process, right? So we're pulling it all the way back to your general chemistry, right? Where it's a movement of electrons, right? You've got an atom, and it wants to have a certain number of electrons for it to be stable. And when you start taking those electrons away, now there's an open space, and it wants to do chemistry. So something like vitamin C, it's an antioxidant because it can take that electron and it can give it away, and then the byproduct, vitamin C, your ascorbic acid, is stable and fine after it gave away that electron.
Okay.
That electron then goes to an oxygen that's looking for an electron, and so now it's been reduced. Or, we've got this redox reaction. One thing's being reduced, the other is being oxidized. But it's just a movement of electrons, which is a negative charge. Which is why I keep going back to this idea of like a magnet. You can think of it as just, everybody likes playing with magnets. They're awesome.
Yeah.
So your blood is it's all the time. It's getting to your lungs, it's binding oxygen, and then it's transporting that to your peripheral tissues, and then it's letting go of that oxygen. So in essence, it's rusting all day long. You're just rusting, derusting, rusting, derusting. So it's this redox reaction that's taking place. So the body's driven a lot by these redox reactions where you're transferring electrons around. And the idea is that your mitochondria, in essence, is a combustion machine.
Right. The powerhouse of the cell,
Powerhouse
right?
of the cell, right? It does a whole lot more than that, but in essence, you take food, which have bonds that were formed because the sun emitted a photon. That photon hit carbon and some protein, like ribisco, which is the most abundant protein in the world. That's what's in plants that allows them to grab CO2 and form a bond between the carbons.
Okay.
And it forms
okay.
another bond, and it forms another bond. And next thing you know, oh, hey, look, you've got glucose. Okay, well, I'm going to add this glucose to the glucose here, and glucose isn't perfectly symmetrical. So if I add a glucose here in this format, then I get cellulose. If I add it here, I get some other kind of starch. And this is why grass and the fiber in your apple, it's all made out of glucose. But because glucose isn't perfectly symmetrical, it depends on where it attaches. And then based on how it attaches, we either have the scissors, the digestive enzymes, to break that bond, or we don't.
Okay.
And this is why you can't eat grass, but you can eat an apple. But they're both made out of glucose.
Interesting.
So in essence, sunshine forms bonds. We eat the plants or eat the things that eat the plants, and we break those bonds. When we break those bonds, it gives us that
energy.
some of that energy back out. And in our mitochondria, we make like air power tools where we break it all the way down to hydrogen. And then that hydrogen binds to, one of the compounds it can bind to is called NAD. This is starting to get really popular on the internet, this idea of NAD and NAD precursors. The idea is that the NAD, which decreases as you age.
What is NAD?
It's a long chemistry name that may or may not make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a nicotinamide compound. It kind of looks like it pulled some stuff from DNA and then a little sugar, and so it's got this big structure. And for the size of it, relative, you would think that it does a whole lot more, but really it just grabs onto one hydrogen from our food, transports it through the mitochondria, and then donates that hydrogen. But it donates it to one of these two proteins, which separates the hydrogen. And if you remember, hydrogen is made out of a proton and an electron.
Mm-hmm.
So the proton, positive charge, gets pumped into this space, this inner membrane space of the mitochondria. And this is where that air power tool comes into effect, where it's creating a pressure. And then the electron goes into a series of proteins. And unlike a power cord where you just have metal wire that's conductive equally all the way across, inside the mitochondria you have these iron-sulfur complexes. And they're arranged in such a way that as the electron binds to one spot, it now has a higher affinity for the next spot. And then it has a higher affinity for the next spot. So like it wants to move to the next spot. We know that electricity moves in the path of least resistance. So it's that kind of idea where like it moves through. So in essence, our mitochondria are moving electrons more than any other system inside of our cells. So the mitochondria has the highest voltage. It also has the highest pressure because all those protons get pumped into this space and it swells up. And then you've got this little protein called ATP synthase.
Okay, well, I've heard of that.
That's this little motor that spins around. So as those protons come through, that pressure, your air power tool, as you pull the trigger, it causes it to spin. And that spinning will grab adenosine diphosphate and a phosphate, and then the spinning motion links those two together. So that's how you reform ATP, adenosine
Triphosphate. And what's the role of adenosine triphosphate?
Adenosine triphosphate will bind to a protein, and you can think of the protein as like this claw structure, right? So the role is that the protein will grab onto some chemical, right? That could be like as a digestive enzyme part of your food, or maybe it needs to form a bond or break a bond. And to do that, it needs to put the molecule into the perfect chemical orientation to allow chemistry to happen. So what happens is ATP will, let's say, bind down here, and then it'll break that phosphate off. When it breaks that phosphate off, it creates a physical movement. So you have a chemical bond that's breaking. That creates a push. That push causes the protein to change shape. As the protein changes shape and now has perfect orientation for chemistry to happen, and then it causes that chemistry to happen, and then it lets go. So you actually burn more ATP every single day than your body weight.
Really? Wow.
Every day. You're constantly generating ATP, and that's why you have a metabolic resting rate. That's the amount of energy that you have to burn to make ATP to power the proteins to do all the work in your body.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So that's why we would always be in a deficit if we weren't to eat anything.
Yeah. So
right?
At some point you stop eating, you run out of energy, you can't power your proteins, things stop working. So that's why, part of the reason why the mitochondria is so important, right, is it's got the highest voltage, it's got the highest pressure. It's also pulling in your food and converting it into not just energy, but also other precursors, right? It's making the precursors for cholesterol, which become your hormones, back to your long-distance communication.
Testosterone, all that stuff.
Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, right? And there's the whole pathway, whole process. It's also making heme, which goes into your blood.
Heme?
Heme. Yeah, so heme is another structure which binds iron. And that's what allows your blood to do that rusting effect. Because you've got your iron, and the iron will bind to oxygen when it's in your lungs, and then it transfers off. And then when there's less oxygen and a change in pressure and pH, it'll change shape, and it pushes off that oxygen. And that oxygen goes into your body, into your mitochondria. You take the carbon from your food, attach it to that oxygen, and the electrons from that mitochondrial process I was talking about. We make CO2 and we make water, and then we breathe out the CO2. So you lose weight as CO2. You breathe out a metabolic waste product.
That's the same process that when you go through, say, like a fat burning program, you oxidize the fat and you breathe it out, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people think that like it just goes away through your waste typically, but aren't you more so breathing it out?
Yeah. So most of it you're generating as CO2. Your mitochondria also produce all the heat in your body.
Okay.
So in addition to ATP synthase, you also have these other proteins that when the proton goes through, it creates friction, and then that friction generates the heat. So a couple of years ago, there was some fat burning pill that was banned because what it did is it bound to the protein that allows the protons to go through to make heat, and it just kept it on. So if you think about it, you can have anywhere from like 10 to 50 mitochondria per cell in your body, and they regulate your body temperature. So you start adding a molecule in that binds to the protein that doesn't let it cool off, and all of a sudden you overheat and you die.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's not on the market anymore. Yeah. But yeah. So back to this idea: if your mitochondria is generating your heat, your voltage, this pressure, your ATP, precursors for multiple things throughout your body. Mitochondria also drive autophagy, which is spring cleaning, or apoptosis, which is controlled cell death. Mitochondria is kind of the boss.
It's critical.
Right? Yeah. And so if we're not eating foods that support our mitochondria, then ultimately we're hurting one of the most important key components of our cell. And so if you're going to eat for your mitochondria, you're going to eat whole foods because foods contain mitochondria and chloroplasts like apples and plants and stuff like that. And this is why so many people have started switching over to like carnivore or like heavy ketone diets, and all these symptoms started to alleviate because they're dumping mitochondria and mitochondria replacement parts in. They're getting more protein in, so now they can make the proteins that they couldn't make because they didn't have enough protein in the first place to, as a building material to make other proteins. And most meat also contains more bioavailable minerals. So now essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, and minerals, by having a heavy protein meat-based diet, you're now getting all the essentials in. Now, that doesn't mean that meat is the end-all, be-all, right? Like, and this is one thing I love about, back to this idea of like bitters and like broccoli and sulforaphane, is that when you cook a steak and you char it, it creates carcinogens and pro-carcinogens, which are not yet carcinogens but could be. You just one little chemistry step and then they're carcinogens.
Okay.
When you consume something like broccoli or your cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, they contain a compound called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane turns on gene regulation for production of both type 2 antioxidants, which would be things like your glutathione.
Okay.
And then it also turns off regulation for proteins that would take your pro-carcinogens and turn them into carcinogens. So consuming something like broccoli with a steak, now all of a sudden you're taking the bad part of the steak, this carcinogenic effect, and you're mitigating the response by the broccoli, right? The same if you put rosemary in, it's reducing the bad stuff that comes from the steak. Steak also pairs very well with potato. Steak has a lot of iron. As you were talking earlier, like iron can cause this rusting effect. You get too much iron in, It's going to cause a dysregulation of oxygen. It can lead to reactive oxygen species and then damage to the cell. Potatoes can bind some of that iron, and then it's not until you digest it further in your intestine that you release that iron. So now instead of having a whole bunch of iron in one spot, you're slowing down iron's ability to have its effect.
Okay.
So pairing plants with meat is ultimately the best way to go. And I know this is going to piss a lot of people off because I know some vegan bodybuilders and I know some carnivore bodybuilders, and they're both pretty healthy. But I've never met anyone that won a gold medal that only ate plants or only ate meat. And so when you look at what the body needs to perform at that level, it's both.
Yeah.
Right? But if most of what you're eating is void of mitochondria or mitochondria replacement parts, then you're going to start having issues. And that's why increasing the amount of protein in a lot of people's diets, this carnivore style, is making them feel better. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with its own caveats and its own issues, especially if it was a dramatic shift. You can think of it, back to this idea of the cell acts like a city. Cities have a personality, right? You go to Texas, and it's going to be a little different than Miami, which is going to be a little different than
Portland.
Nebraska or Portland, right? Like, they're all very different people. They're different cities.
Yeah.
So when you dramatically change your diet, man, the cells need time to catch up. They need time to change. They need time to do things. And this is where, if you're trying to lose weight, the visceral fat didn't hop on in 2 months out of nowhere, right? It took some time to get there. And so if you can adjust the way that you're consuming food, putting this energy-intensive demand on your body to digest your food, then you can get rid of that visceral fat by allowing your body to communicate and not feel stressed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that high levels of cortisol is really one of the main indicators of having a lot of visceral fat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's this weird caveat, like if you twist your ankle, it's going to swell up.
Right.
It's going to generate reactive oxygen species. That's necessary to kickstart the process to heal, to trigger the immune system, to tell you to stop moving, so it can take the energy of whatever you were putting towards and direct it all to the injury, right?
Okay.
So you need those reactive oxygen species, and you need that cortisol, and you need that epinephrine, and you need those stressors to make biology move in a direction where otherwise it wouldn't do it because it's having to pull energy from somewhere else to do it, right? It's the same thing. We know that sugar suppresses the immune system because sugar causes insulin to spike, and insulin says no to everything else. And so you're having to focus on sugar, which is pulling away from your immune system's proper functioning. So if you're riding this insulin roller coaster where breakfast, French toast, then you have a nice little snack, and oh, there was donuts in the office. And then you've got a nice, sandwich with lots of bread at lunch, and then you find some cereal bar or something in the afternoon, and then you've got whatever dinner which has a carbohydrate, and then maybe a little ice cream.
Yeah.
Your body has never been able to get into like doing the things it needs to do because all day long it's been working on your metabolism. And this is why fasting can be so beneficial, because it's giving your body time to do all the other stuff it knows it needs to do.
Yeah.
But if you're not used to it, or you go too long, it's going to create that additional stress, which is going to prevent you from breaking down your visceral fat. So it's really finding that sweet spot and realizing that, it's about to be 2026. We can spend 2026 going through and saying, hey, we're changing the trajectory of our cell. We're increasing the efficiency of communication, and we're doing so in a way that doesn't cost a lot of mental input. It doesn't cost a lot of money. We're just adding certain molecules and nutrients in. We're timing it in different ways. We're lowering our stress and making sure that things are kind of working the way we want it to. And then you just go about your normal life, and you'll all of a sudden start losing weight because you're not telling your body to keep it.
Right. And that's kind of what we do when we're eating foods high in carbs and sugar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're saying, hey, we're preparing for for
Winter.
stress, or
Yeah.
whatever. So get ready for the long haul and keep this fat on, kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
Is that true, or
No, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm following along
so,
correctly.
Yeah, so when cortisol goes up, it stops you from breaking down visceral fat. Cortisol also triggers release of sugar, release of glucose,
Interesting. Okay.
which then raises your insulin, which then stops burning of fat. So it's this cycle. And fat cells in general don't want to shrink. So the bigger you are, the hungrier you are because you have more fat cells that are releasing signals as you start to lose weight. So a big person literally is hungrier than you,
Yeah.
right? And so, ultimately avoiding getting to that point is ideal. And that's why I think, when I see children that are starting to get kind of heavy set, sometimes, like my brother, he called him a couch potato, but then he had his growth spurt and he scaled up, he was fine. But his body also had the minerals and the proteins and the stuff it needed so he could grow. Our diets today, it's just not in our food, right? You say, eat Brazil nuts for selenium. If that selenium wasn't in the dirt near the tree, it's not in the nut. You're not getting it. Unless you're doing fusion or fission inside of your body, which none of us are, you're not making minerals out of nowhere. And if you're not getting those minerals in, then the proteins can't work. This is something I talk about all the time, and it's such an easy fix, right? We think about electrolytes, and we say electrolytes are good, but salt is bad, and then minerals are some other thing. But they're all the exact same thing, right? If you look at the periodic table, sodium, potassium, magnesium, those are all salts. Those are all minerals. It's the same with lithium and cobalt and iron and zinc, right? We call those minerals, but they're all just elements on the periodic table, and our body needs those elements to function, right? You can't bring glucose into the cell without sodium.
Right.
When sodium and glucose come in, potassium comes out. Okay. Certain proteins in your thyroid need iodine. Your bones require selenium to make new white blood cells. Testosterone puts pressure on your bone marrow to make new red blood cells, right? So you've got all these different mechanisms of cholesterol products and minerals that allow your body to generate the things it needs to protect itself, to communicate to itself. And those minerals used to be in the dirt, right? Our grandparents just ate food, it was in the dirt. They didn't have to pay extra for organic, it was just dirt. Now we've got to pay more for them not to poison our food, which is ridiculous. But that's one of the simplest, cheapest things that I've stumbled across is just getting more minerals into your food on a regular basis. This idea of microdosing minerals, I think is one of the best things we can do. So I buy salt that has slightly more trace minerals. There's different brands out there. I was doing like a Baja Gold Sea salt, and there's like some other ones. People have started to screen them and say, okay, do these also have some heavy metals like arsenic, cadmium, stuff like that, mercury? So finding a brand where you're getting some of the trace minerals, but you're not getting those heavy metals is important. And then I mix that 50-50 with the salt that just has more potassium in it. And it's kind of blue, which looks cool. So I'll just mix that into my salt shaker. And then anytime that I'm putting water in my water bottle or I'm cooking food, I always add salt into it. Because again, you can't get glucose into the cell without sodium. And if you're sweating and you're excreting fluids and that potassium doesn't have enough time to get back in, you're going to be short on potassium, which is why, eat a banana when you work out, you cramp, right? The same goes with magnesium, right? If you're not getting magnesium in, you can overheat. You can have cramps. You can have brain fog.
Your sleep's going to suffer.
Sleep's going to suffer. Like magnesium's involved in like 500 plus different chemical reactions, like super important. So instead of paying lots of money for an electrolyte solution where you just have a super salty ocean water kind of flavor, you can do like humans did 100 years to whenever we got put on this planet, is you just consume salt with every meal. right? You're drinking some water, it's got some salt in it. Some food, put some salt in it, right? So I just sprinkle that salt onto all of my food, and that way that I'm just getting salt in, and I haven't cramped in years. And, there's been times where I'm like, I should probably stretch a little, and then I'll run 6 miles with my daughter, and I'm like, oh, that went surprisingly well. Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. But I've got a reserve I've built up, right? And if I start sweating and exercising more, then I'll increase that. But if you mimic the way that the body is used to getting nutrients, which is from whole foods or foods that have minerals in it, then you're setting yourself up for success. There are some caveats to that, right?
Okay.
Like fish oil. I used to be a big believer in I'm just going to eat fish instead of the fish oil, because as you take out the oil, it can become rancid. It can start to degrade. It can be oxidized. If it gets too warm, other issues can happen. So you just get it from the fish, right? Cold water, fresh, frozen, keep it cool, life's good. If you live in Seattle, well, sure, that's great. They'll throw the fish around in front of you, and then you get to take it home, chop it up, eat it, and life's good. But fish also contain quite a bit of mercury.
Yeah.
So if you can find a supplement, which I have, that tests for those heavy metals and has good quality fish oil, then I think that's probably the better way to get your omega-3s and DHAs and EPAs in those fish oils. Because, like walnuts and other plants do have omega-3s, but they're not the same type of omega-3 as you would get from fish oil.
Okay.
Right? So omega is just the end, right? Alpha omega. So if you have a fat, like this microphone, and it starts here, and then the fat can have any kind of length to it, and wherever the end is, that's your omega. So counting in from your omega, 1, 2, 3, to that third bond, if that bond has a double bond, that's an omega-3. If the double bond is at the 6th carbon, it's an omega-6, or an omega-9, an omega-7.
Okay.
But it doesn't tell you how long the fat is. So the fat could be this long, or it could be this long. If it's this long and it's an omega-3, it's going to be very different than if it's this long and it's an omega-3. So they're both good for you, whether it's from walnuts or from fish, but they're not the same. And so I think that's something that is important. I think most people should eat walnuts every day. They're pretty safe and pretty good. They're dry, but that's okay. But yeah, fish oil is something that I've started to teeter on. Like, I still eat fish. Like, I had fish for dinner last night, but I coated it in cilantro, because cilantro can bind heavy metals. It will chelate them and help get them out of your body.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And this is super important too, where it's like, if a protein doesn't have the mineral it needs, the metal, it can't function properly. But a heavy metal, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, right, can displace that mineral, and then now your protein doesn't work, and it's carrying around some heavy metal. So you still have a protein that's not working, whether you didn't have the minerals or you had unwanted minerals present. And biology is really good at, kind of only grabbing onto the things that it wants, but every once in a while those heavy metals can get in and displace the stuff that's supposed to be there. So if you're going to consume something that has heavy metals in it, it's incredibly important to add plant compounds in that can help chelate those. Cilantro is one of those. Parsley is also really good. Different sea mosses and algae as well. Because algae are so good at binding metals, first of all, you should never eat seaweed just on the beach. Not that most people do, but I've measured the amount of arsenic and cadmium and mercury and all these heavy metals in seaweed from the ocean, and they bind a lot of heavy metals. So if you're getting an algae supplement from somewhere, you want to have a statement of, we looked for heavy metals and they're not in our algae, right? Because if you're taking algae to detox yourself, but the algae is full of heavy metals, then you're not helping anything at all. But things to look out for are, definitely fish and rice. rice is notorious for having a lot of arsenic.
Really?
Luckily, you can wash your rice, right? You can only wash your salmon so well. There's, they're really embedded in there. But with rice, you can wash it like crazy, and you can soak it, and then you can wash it again, and that has a substantial reduction of arsenic.
Wow.
So that's definitely something that everybody should do. Most, particularly the Asian colleagues and friends of mine, they're like, oh yeah, we always wash our rice. And I know quite a few Hispanic people that are like, oh yeah, we wash it. But I know some that are like, I don't wash my rice. Like, why would I do that? And I'm like, arsenic poisoning? Like,
Yeah.
So wash your rice, eat cilantro with fish. Those are ways to ensure that your proteins are functioning properly. And then getting trace minerals into your diet. There's a brand called Trace that has it. There's a multivitamin I take called Vitalite, and it has your vitamins and minerals, which are derived from food. So if you think about how our bodies are designed to get vitamins and minerals, it's from our food.
Right.
So these are still bound to the food source. And then it's got digestive enzymes to kind of kickstart that process because it is a pill, so you're bypassing the taste part of it. So once it gets into your gut, you need those digestive enzymes to kickstart that process. And then it has the fish oil, which oils are necessary to absorb your fat-soluble vitamins. And then it has different plants in it, specifically like bitter melon and others that help regulate your own GLP-1 production. So this multivitamin isn't just a multivitamin, it's a collection of foods that ensures that you're getting the vitamins and minerals at a high bioavailability and that you're triggering your body's natural method of absorbing them and then utilizing them and having cellular communication and then body communication.
Interesting.
Because if you take just a little tablet that's got your multivitamins in it and your minerals, like most of the time they're not going to be absorbed.
Right.
Because your body, as soon as they show up, they're like, oh, I didn't know you were on your way. And then you solubilize it, and maybe some gets into your circulatory system, some doesn't.
Doesn't a lot of that depend on like the gut bacteria though?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some things your body has a pretty high propensity for pulling out. Your gut bacteria do typically get first access.
Okay.
Right? You think of, you've got the single cell lining, and you've got this little alveolus up top, and then it's packed full of bacteria. So unless you have leaky gut where the cells have been separated and things can just flow in, or bad connection between the two, so there's gaps for them to get in, the bacteria typically interact with the foods and the molecules, and then it goes into your gut. But if you think about just mass transfer from like an engineering standpoint, the amount of food that you eat, there's no way that the bacteria have time to like scan through every single molecule of food before it gets into your circulatory system. Because you can eat a bag of spinach, and within an hour, the amount of chlorophyll metabolites circulating in your blood is way beyond the metabolic rate of the bacteria in your gut. So some of it just gets in. But the bacteria will influence, and they can create, mucous membranes that help slow down the food. Mm-hmm. So back to the idea of eating your fibers first, the bacteria can digest fibers where our human cells can't. So as they start consuming those fibers, they're excreting this extracellular matrix, this mucus, that slows down the path of your food, giving yourself more time to digest it, to break it down, to let the bacteria get what they want out of it, to chop it up a little bit more, so when it starts getting to your intestine, for you to absorb, it's pre-processed.
Okay.
Right. So eating that fiber and then eating the protein and then your carbohydrates last, I could probably go through like 6 different avenues as to why that's beneficial.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. I had no idea that there was kind of a methodology of what to eat first. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's going to be super helpful, especially like knowing that. Well, actually, I wanted to ask you a question on this. Is it that our taste buds, they tell us whether something is sweet or whether it's bitter or whether it's saltier? So do our taste buds play a big part in activating like those proteins or those hormones?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Right, yeah. So if you taste something bitter, there's certain receptors that are responding to that bitter.
Yeah.
And then they're communicating to your body, hey, this is on the way, let's prepare. And this is why things like MSG, monosodium glutamate, were so prevalent in a lot of foods, because they react with a wider array of taste buds than most other compounds, but it acts just like a salt. It's monosodium, so a sodium, and then a glutamate, which is an amino acid. But that orientation just happens to fit into more of the receptors on different parts of your tongue, so now you taste different things.
Really?
So it makes
Okay.
it taste better, because now you think that you're getting these nutrients and these ones and these ones and these ones. So your body's like, yes, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then the byproduct is just MSG, it's just the sodium and glutamate. But if you think about how that's dysregulating the communication, because your taste buds are no longer communicating the right signal.
How do we stimulate like things like the vagus nerve in order to help us relax?
Okay, yeah, so there's quite a few. One of them was almost shocking to me, but cold water on your face. You
Okay.
think cold water is it's gonna wake you up, right? But the cold stimulates the vagus nerve and the rest of your body to pay attention. But you're only gonna leave your face in cold water for so long, right? Or if you're just kind of washing it with cold water. So the act of not dying, not needing to freak out, it's that act of, like, have you ever done a cold plunge?
I have, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you get in and what do you feel at first?
A ton of adrenaline. Yep. You're just wide awake, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like panic, right? I see
Yeah.
people jump in. There was one I did just the other day. A whole group of us jumped into the Snake River, and then a friend of mine has like a trailer that's turned into a sauna. So you can kind of go back and forth. It was awesome. But you see people jump in and they just immediately they're like clawing to get out.
Start breathing very shallow. Yeah.
But if you get out and warm up and then you jump back in and then you get out and then you jump back in, that third time, you can just hang out in the cold water for a whole lot longer, because you've turned off the scared part. You realize that you're not going to die. So it's that same thing when your face is really, really sensitive to cold. It has, just more awareness of cold. So when you put your face in cold water, or you just kind of splash it with cold, it's triggering that initial oh, I'm okay. And then the I'm okay is triggering that rest and digest, like things are going to be okay.
Okay. It's kind of like that same idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like that same idea that if you have an injury, your body kind of goes into high alert mode, surrounds the injury, sends whatever it needs to help the injury, and then when you're healed, it's like, oh, it's okay, and it's like stronger, right? Or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, yeah, so it needs to signal. So there's the stress aspect. Pull energy away from whatever you were doing, focus on this, in order to kickstart that process, yeah.
Okay.
But it has that shock response to get your attention.
Yeah.
Biology is pretty lazy, right? Like, unless, this is like that thing of like motivation, right? You listen to like some motivational music and you like get up and you're going, but that doesn't mean it's going to work every single. Like, motivation can really only get you so far. Like, you got to have your why, you got to have a reason, or you've got to have an injury that's going to trigger biology to do something against attempting to increase maximum survival, which is storing fat, storing protein as muscle, and then just accumulating nutrients and then not exerting itself too much, but enough. And then so when you've got like psychological stress and stuff like that, you're telling your body to be stressed and to store more weight because it thinks that something bad's going to happen. And we have that mechanism because, well, we have seasons on the planet, and we used to have time where it was cold and you didn't have access to as much food. So having a little extra fat was incredibly beneficial because it allowed you to have energy through longer periods of time. So we've just kind of hijacked that method because now we have Walmart. I call it the Walmart effect, right? Like, you can just go get whatever food you want anytime.
Yeah.
So we just naturally don't fast as much. But yeah, cold water on the face. One of my favorites is actually humming.
Humming. Like,
yeah. Yeah. Or you're cooking food, put some music on and just hum along, right? The act of humming, that vibration, can help stimulate the vagus nerve.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to be attacked by an animal, you probably want to be humming, right?
Right,
So, like,
right.
it's definitely not a like, oh, I'm about to be attacked kind of signaling, which goes back to like meditation, like the om and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The other really, really cool thing about humming is when you hum, it generates nitric oxide. And when you breathe in through your nose, that nitric oxide is then getting into your circulatory system, which is it's vasodilating. So it's causing a drop in blood pressure, which then feeds back into the vagus nerve of like calming you down. So the act of humming your song while you're cooking, humming in the car.
Holding a baby and humming to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's calming, it's relaxing, and there's multiple facets at which that stimulates the vagus nerve and connection to each of the different organs and the circulatory system. So yeah, humming's awesome. Bitter foods as well trigger the vagus nerve. So like I said, you can have arugula with a meal. There's another company I stumbled across where they've started extracting the bitterness out of hops. So hops is typical, like goes in beer, right? So like an IPA, you just put more hops in later in the process, so it has more of that hoppy kind of bitter flavor. And so back to that bitter toxin aspect. So this is just like its little water-soluble pack. So you can keep them in your car, and then before you go in to a restaurant or you're going to eat some big meal or something, you can just crack that open on your tongue, get that bitter, and then now you can go about your night like normal, not being some weird person like pulling out arugula and putting a bunch of stuff on your food, and everyone's like, what's this weirdo? We're not inviting them back again, right? Like we've got to make this a common thing that we're doing where we're supporting activities of health, but we need to do so such that our culture can adapt.
Yeah.
Because if you go too hard too fast, it's going to create a little subgroup, and then it's just going to separate. So it's just base psychology. So that's why I'm like, let's dummy proof it and make it simple, so it's easier to integrate in.
Yeah, let's add water to the lemon instead of hum, at like an inappropriate time or something.
Yeah. Someone's asking you a question, you're like, Yeah. So humming while you're cooking, that's great. Olive oil.
Yeah, you were talking about that. You were talking about how it's
olive oil
helps you digest vitamins better, right?
Yeah, olive oil is awesome for so many things. Like it's like there's a lot of terms of like superfoods, but I think olive oil is really like one of the top because it's got a beautiful blend of like omega-3 to omega-6. Omega-6 isn't bad. Too much omega-6 is bad.
Right.
So when you've got corn and soy and canola oil in abundance and all of our food's fried in it and it's in all of our baked goods, you're now getting too much of it, and that's being used to build our cell membranes.
Okay.
When a cell has too much omega-6 and your mitochondria get stressed, as it does, those reactive oxygen species interact with the cell membrane. If it interacts with an omega-3 just got this itty-bitty little change, right? It's just like my wrist doing this. An omega-6, it's further back. So now there's more leverage. So if I hit this and it springs, there's now more physical movement that's taking place, more damage that can be caused in the cell. Omega-6 does give the cells more fluidity. So this is where a lot of the research of like, oh, omega-6 is really good for your heart, and things that are constantly moving, it's not as rigid. If everything was made out of saturated fats, it'd be like butter, where it's not an oil at room temperature, right? It's soft, but it's too rigid. Your cell membranes need saturated and unsaturated fats, specifically omega-6 and omega-3. Omega-7 is actually really great for your intestinal lining too. Okay. That multivitamin I was telling you about earlier has omega-7 in
it. So the higher you go up in numbers in like omega fats, is that the more saturated they become?
No, it's again, you're counting from the end. So if you've got, say, 20 carbons, as you count from the end, you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's just whatever carbon you get to, that's where there's a double bond.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's what omega means.
Okay.
Yeah. So having having a healthy ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 is really good for your cell membranes, and olive oil has a lot of that. Olive oil also has a lot of polyphenols, which are great as antioxidants and building materials and precursors to make other stuff in your body. It's an oil, so it's a transportation molecule to get those fat-soluble vitamins in. Many compounds in plants, these polyphenols, these beneficial molecules in plants don't like water. They're hydrophobic.
Really? Okay.
And your circulatory system is like 90% water, right? There's a lot of water. So you've got to package stuff up to transport it. And that's why olive oil is such a good mechanism, is because you can package up those polyphenols. Olive oil already has tons of polyphenols in it. It's literally one of the best mechanisms to deliver polyphenols. And then just like when you put oil in water, it forms that little barrier, little bubble, but those bubbles can fuse together. Your cell membrane is made out of fat. So these polyphenols, this olive oil transporting your vitamins and your minerals, vitamin D, A, K, and E, and all these polyphenols can bind to a membrane and then just fuse into it. They just become part of the membrane. So now you're not having to go through metabolism to generate new membrane components and transfer it over. You're just pulling in replacement parts directly from your diet as olive oil, which is a wonderful cell membrane building barrier that's more resistant to cellular stress
Interesting.
than your canola and your other seed oils.
Sunflower oil, soybean oil.
And like sunflowers can grow on soil that has too much heavy metal that's toxic. A lot of that gets into the oil. So your sunflower oils usually have a lot of heavy metals. Your canola and your soy often have a lot of glyphosate. Glyphosate is a compound that inhibits amino acid synthesis for bacteria. Guess what? There's a lot of bacteria in your gut. So this is why people have issues with wheat and bread here in the States, but not when they travel, is because there's so much glyphosate in our breads and our corn and our soy and our peanuts and all this that the gut bacteria are getting pissed off every time you eat, and it's causing inflammation and causing all these issues. But it's because there's a poison jacking stuff up in the first place.
Interesting.
Yeah. So eating with the olive oil is super helpful. It's got that bitterness, so it's helping regulate the GLP-1 along with the lipid aspect and then stimulating the vagus nerve. So pretty much anytime I eat bread, bread is just my vessel to get more olive oil in my diet. That's how I see it. Like if I have a piece of bread, like let's say toast with breakfast, I'll soak it with olive oil, or I'll take the bread and I'll tear it up and I'll put it in the bottom of a bowl, and then I'll sprinkle olive oil on it or pour olive oil, and then I'll add my eggs on top, or lamb or beef or whatever I'm eating on top of it. And that way the bread is at the bottom of the bowl, I'm eating it last, and then it's soaking up all those fluids, all those healthy fats, which is going to lower that insulin spike. It's going to lower the glucose spike. It's going to keep the cortisol level down. So as my body gets those carbohydrates in, it's not triggering a stress response, and I don't immediately need to turn them into fat. So I'm preventing visceral fat formation by eating the carbs last or by putting lots of olive oil on them.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And it's little things like that make such a huge difference, right? Like buttering your bread. You're like, oh, yeah, everybody butters your bread. Well, put more butter on it, right? Like I almost never eat bread just by itself. Sometimes I have cake, but I'll always opt in for ice cream instead of cake because ice cream has more fat. So it's nudging in that right direction, right?
Right.
So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
It seems like that there's like a lot of things that you can either take with your food that kind of minimize the effects of, detrimental effects, whatever they may be, or you can do things beforehand or afterhand to help kind of steer your body in the right direction in the first place.
Oh yeah, and there's tons of things to do. Right?
Yeah.
Another one, like we know that walking is good after you eat. Your calves, one of the most dense muscles on your body, have special glucose transporters.
Really? Wow.
So
your calves.
Your calves. Yeah.
Okay.
The solaris muscle. So your calves, super dense muscle, so they need more glycogen, which means they can burn more sugars faster, because they're dense. There's more muscle per square footage. So walking is telling your body, hey, this is where I want you to put your excess sugar, your excess energy, put it into the calves and just burn it off right now as you're walking. You could also sit and under the table, just move your calves. Kind of inconspicuous, right? You could be crazy about it, but just doing this during your meal, if you can do that through your whole meal, multiple studies showing how much it lowers your glucose spike just by moving your calves.
That's so interesting because you're storing the glucose in your calf.
Well, yeah,
or are you using you're using it, you're burning it?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you're definitely, you're burning it. And then like I was saying, with the glucose transporters, your liver has no barrier, right? If there's glucose, it can just pull it in, it can dump it out freely, right? And this is why you see kids that drink lots of juice, which is just concentrated sugar that tastes like orange or apple, get fatty acid liver disease because the liver will pull all that glucose in, but you can't leave it as glucose because glucose causes damage. So you convert it into a fat, which is easier to store because it's more stable. And then because you can't get that into his other cells, you have to store it up in your liver. So it just gets fatty in your liver. So you get fatty acid liver disease, which is the same thing as alcoholics would get after 30 years. And as of today, in the United States, we have teenagers and early 20-year-olds that have fatty acid liver disease because they've been consuming fruit juices in excess since they were a kid.
Jeez.
Sugar is not our friend. It's
Yeah.
like if you're exercising in the moment, sure, but the rest of the time, like we've got to reframe the way we look at it. But there's something I was saying.
We were saying a lot.
Yeah, I was going somewhere and then I got sidetracked.
What was it in reference to GLP-1?
No, what did we just start talking about? Oh yeah, your calves. Okay, so your calves can trigger glucose absorption through mechanical movement.
Repeat that one more time.
So
I just want to make sure I'm following.
your calves can trigger glucose absorption. They can pull glucose into the cell after there's a mechanical movement.
Okay.
Right? So do you remember I was saying earlier your gut will expand, and in your gut you have these L cells, and when they have a mechanical pressure, they expand, they release GLP-1. It's a trigger for foods present. Your calves, whenever they flex, they'll squeeze the glucose transporter, and that allows glucose to come in, but you don't need insulin to show up first. They're more sensitive to bringing glucose in. And then because they're so dense, they can burn through that glucose faster.
Interesting.
So this is why walking after a meal or before a meal
It's
is
going to
so
stabilize your blood
beneficial.
sugar.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you can just move your calves under the table or in front of the TV, or really if you're snacking at all, I would suggest moving your calves.
Okay.
Right? Because you're telling your body, this is what I want you to do with the food that I'm giving you.
Yeah.
I've got a little L shape in my kitchen, so I'll do dips right before I eat a meal. Mm-hmm. I'll do body weight squats. Right? The idea is that I want to tell my body, food's on the way. I just tasted it as I was cooking, and I chewed it up like crazy. So these are the nutrients that are on their way. And then now I'm going to do some sort of exercise that's going to stimulate a muscle that's going to say, hey, this guy could use some extra glycogen. So let's take that energy in the form of food, and instead of converting it into fat, let's start turning it into storage of glycogen.
And store it in the muscles,
and
right?
Store it in the muscle. And this is like, I went to the gym once in December, the entire month of December. I went 2 days ago, first time I went in. I haven't lost any muscle mass. I didn't lose any strength. I was moving the same weight, the same amount of times. And, it felt a little like, yeah, it's been a month, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't lose any strength. Think about that. You don't have to lose the muscle that you once built. And if you spend a lifetime walking, you can build strong calves. Every single time you do body weight squats or any sort of exercise, you can keep that muscle. You just have to learn how your body communicates to keep that muscle. You've got to make sure you're getting enough protein in so you don't liquefy muscle mass to get a source of amino acids. And you've got to keep that inflammation and stress lower.
Let me ask you this. So I know for building muscle, people say it's optimal to be 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, correct?
Yeah.
Is that also true for maintaining muscle?
No.
No.
No. So there's a saying that's becoming more popular of eat 1 gram of protein per the body weight that you want to be.
Right.
And I think there's definitely some validity to that. And if it encourages people to eat more protein and have a heavier protein diet, that means they're going to get more of those essential amino acids, essential fatty acids, and more minerals. So they're supporting overall health. They're supporting their mitochondria, right? There's all these different facets that's adding value to. But you've got a certain amount of protein that's functional in your body. And every single time you do something different, some of those proteins have to change. So
Okay.
think about if you're sleeping. Think about a company, right? At nighttime, and there's very few workers, there's very few customers. It's a different dynamic. You can stock, you can prep things. That morning rush comes in and people start to show up. You hit lunchtime hour. You're going to need more employees. There's more activity. You're not going to have as much time to stock to grab stuff. It's more chaotic. That same thing's happening inside of your cells. When you're asleep and you wake up, when you're awake and then you start digesting food, when you're done digesting food and now you're doing some activity, you're going to the gym, you're calming down from the gym, you're hanging out with your kids, you're dealing with some stress. Every time you do something new, your body's transitioning, and that means it needs new proteins to do the new things. It will break down the proteins that are there back into amino acids to build them up into new proteins, but that process isn't 100% efficient. This becomes more imperative when you realize that of the 20 amino acids we have, some of them are essential, which means we have to get them from our diet because we can't make them. We can take the essential amino acids and convert them into other amino acids, but we can't take those other ones and convert them back. So by consuming those essential amino acids regularly, you're now preventing your body's need to break down protein to get those amino acids.
Okay.
So I've been consuming essential amino acids, not the BCAAs, the branch chain amino acids. I've been consuming the essential amino acids for probably 10 years, right? Finding supplements that have those essential amino acids. One of the most popular ones from a guy, Gary Brecka, it's called Perfect Amino. There's definitely other brands out there. And again, it's just the essential amino acids. So it's a little 5-gram scoop. And just adding that in is going to dramatically change your amino acid profile and help you keep more of that muscle mass.
Okay.
So,
and you also get amino acids through your diet, obviously, but mostly through meat, right?
well, yeah. So you can get all living things generate proteins to do work.
Right.
Right. It then becomes a question of bioavailability. How much of the protein inside the cell of a plant that has a cell wall are you getting? If you throw it through a blender or a juicer, you're rupturing all the membranes. You're now going to be able to get more of that protein out. If you're just chewing your spinach and you're in a hurry, it's not going to be as bioavailable because you're not going to be able to break down enough of that cell wall with your bacteria to be able to get to the protein in time for it to matter. With that, you also have different foods have different ratios of amino acids. They have a different amino acid profile. So you tie on the amino acid profile and then you tie on the bioavailability. And yeah, you're getting that from your diet. But no matter what protein you're getting from your diet, unless you're eating a substantial amount of protein from a variety of sources every single day, you can still end up running short on those essential amino acids.
Okay.
And the other thing to note is that there's 20 amino acids, and they all do different stuff. So just by, and this is like the idea of calories. I've got a whole video where I'm calling calories, it's elementary, right? Because if I take fat and I put it into a combustion machine and I set it on fire and I measure how much energy I get out, it's 9 kilocalories per gram of fat, right? So that's how we measure the calories in our food. So if I put, a gram of protein in and I set it on fire, a certain amount of energy comes out. But when I eat that protein, not every amino acid can be used as a metabolic fuel source.
Okay.
Some are only used for building. Some are used as neurotransmitters and signaling molecules and don't get broken down into metabolism. So when you're eating a heavy protein diet, you're actually eating way less calories than you actually think you're eating let me take that back. You're eating the same amount of calorie as you would think, because a calorie is measured by combustion. But the amount of energy you're putting in for functional metabolic energy is much lower for protein than it is for fat and carbohydrate.
Okay.
Because only a portion of those amino acids can be used for metabolic energy production. So that's why I think consuming those essential amino acids as a supplement is so incredibly important and valuable for maintaining your own muscle mass, and that way you get to keep your muscle over time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. The essential amino acids, olive oil, fish oil, and then minerals, right? Making sure you're getting the salts and stuff in. If you can just hit those foundational levels, it makes everything else a million times easier, right? And then you can move to that communication aspect. Eat the pickle with your sandwich first. Eat more fermented food at the beginning of the meal, right? Eat more of the bitter stuff, the lemon in the water. Consume your pop or sugars or carbohydrates at the very end of your meal. Move your calves. Hum, right? Cold water on the face. There's a few other things I had. Oh, yeah, obvious things. Deep breathing, yoga, gargling.
Really?
Yeah, I saw a publication showing that gargling helps stimulate the vagus nerve. It's that same idea of the vibration. There may be a lot of guys that don't like to hear this, but hearing yourself talk, the vibration that comes from your voice, similar to humming, stimulates the vagus nerve to calm down.
I believe that. Yeah.
Women typically have higher amounts of stress. The way their brain's connected, the hemispheres it's a super highway. There's a lot more going on. There's more activity in the prefrontal cortex. The portion of the brain that deals with communication is just physically larger. We all start off as women, brain-wise, and then as testosterone kicks in, it pulls away from the communication part to become more like male characteristic. So this is why in early childhood you see that girls tend to be more verbal. They look at each other more. They're just further along in the communication aspect because they didn't have to break away to become male or develop more male-like characteristics, right? So because they're more stressed, it makes sense that they would typically want to talk more because it's a mechanism to calm them down. I also was reading something else with women where the act of talking about their problems calms them down.
Interesting.
Where men, once we talk about our problems, if we don't have like a solution or thing we're going to do, it stresses us out.
Yeah.
So there's definitely this difference, the dichotomy at home where it's like, okay, are you just wanting to talk to me, or are you wanting for me to come up with a solution? Because if my solution is listening to you makes you feel better, then in my mind I have a solution and I feel better about just listening. But if you want me to come up with a solution for whatever it is you're upset about, then that's the default that my brain's going to do. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I've started to utilize as a complete side quest to most of the stuff we've been talking about. But I think valuable because it goes back to that vagus nerve, right?
Yeah. Well, I had a question for you about this, and I think we touched on this before we filmed this episode. So I have a shock T mat Did I tell you about this?
Okay, yeah, it's got the little points.
Yeah, it has like little spikes on it, and it's supposed to mimic like a bed of nails.
Yeah.
Right. Anyways, and you lay on it, and the first couple of minutes are really like uncomfortable. You almost feel like you're, getting scratched up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then eventually your body kind of just naturally relaxes into it more and more. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, is this kind of how the vagus nerve, is this how another way to trigger the vagus nerve to help us relax? Like, is that playing a part, or am I just...
No, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So if you think about why our body would trigger the release of glucose and to make the vagus nerves, fight or flight come on, right? It's because something's going to cause us harm. And if our body, left to its own demise, is only going to put 5 grams of glucose circulating in our body at any one time, it's going to leave us in a more ketosis-like state, then we don't have readily accessible sugar to respond to a threat. So doing something that triggers that initial release of sugar, that stress, like the spiked bed or a cold plunge, or really kind of doing anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, but then you realize that you're okay, what's happening is you're quickly pushing your body into the oh no. And then when you start to come back, you're turning on the vagus nerve's ability to drive you back into rest and digest.
Okay.
So repetitive use of uncomfortable situations makes you more resilient at staying calm and relaxed.
Like exposure therapy.
Exposure therapy, right? You're training the brain, you're training the biological systems to calm you back down. One of my favorite exercises to do, I learned from, it's called the School of Metaphysics, and it's this candle concentration exercise. What you do is you get a candle, you set a timer, and a pencil and paper. And then you attempt to put all of your attention on the candle, right? And your brain's going to wander. That's what the brain does, right? This is why meditation's so hard. Like, to completely clear your brain is very, very challenging. But this act of attempting to put all of your attention onto the flame, it's a baby step, because you can smell it, you can see it, you can hear the flicker, right? It's moving. So it makes it easier to use all of your senses, but you're pulling it all in to one point source. You're not going completely silent in your brain, you're just focusing. And then your brain's going to wander. Every time that you bring your attention back, you're like, oh, I'm thinking about something else, you make a mark on the paper. When I was doing this with my teenage daughter, she's like, I don't like the mark because I'm like counting how many times I messed up. I'm like, no, that's not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're making a mark as this is how many times I brought my attention back. This is how many times I regained focus. And it's that same thing with the cold or your bed of nails. What's it called?
Shakti.
Shakti, okay. Is that you're training your body, hey, I'm getting stressed, and I'm going to bring it back. I'm okay. This is the path, the process, the feeling of calming back down. And you're telling your body that this is a normal pathway. Let's build new neurons. Your nervous system isn't just in your brain, it's through your whole body.
Right.
If we have an organ transplant, you're going to have some of my memories, because memories aren't just stored in the brain, they're stored everywhere.
Yeah.
So that full body immersion speeds up that process. So then when you do have real stress in life and it's over, you can lower that inflammation path so that you're stopping.
Interesting.
Right? You need the inflammation to get the process started, but you don't want it to linger. Lingering inflammation is at the root cause of all disease.
Right, okay.
All disease has an inflammatory aspect to it. So the more that you can support mitochondrial health, the more that you can support communication of your body, releasing glutathione and getting good sleep so you have melatonin, which is a powerful antioxidant. And you can help with this rest and digest vagus nerve aspect. The more that you can train that, then the more your body can be in a low inflammatory state, So when you do have an actual infection or an injury or a toxin or something that harms your body, you can respond and then quickly get back to a place of, we can handle this, we can deal with it. Right?
That makes sense. It almost seems paradoxical in a sense, right? Where it's like you have to expose yourself to uncomfortable situations or scenarios to force stress upon yourself to let your body know that it's okay to be stressed.
Yeah.
But you don't want, like you said, you don't want a prolonged amount of stress over a certain amount of time, because if that happens, that can lead to disease and
And think about this from
That's
a cell
so interesting.
level.
I never thought about that.
This is incredibly powerful, right? Because in your brain, or any of our brains, we have psychological stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to pay the bills? I just got into a car wreck. Somebody I cared about died. Somebody lied to me, right? You've got all these things like, oh, work stress, I've got deadlines. Something just broke, what do I do, right? All these things that are happening. But your cells aren't thinking those thoughts. Your cells are only responding to their environment, right? If I take a stem cell, an undifferentiated cell, doesn't know what it's going to be with, it's pluripotent, and I put it near kidney cells, it becomes a kidney. If I put it near a brain cell, it becomes a brain cell. All of your cells contain all the same DNA. They just read different portions and then adapt to their environment. My recent publication was looking at how the cytoskeleton and how proteins that regulate the cytoskeleton and all these other factors in the cell respond to a lack there of gravity. The cytoskeleton is constantly changing. It's growing, it's dynamic all the time. It's always growing new roads. So when you're putting pressure on it, when you're exercising regularly, you're telling your cells through stress, I need you to be able to be capable of doing this. I walk a lot, I lift weights, any sort of labor sort of job, right? I fix stuff, I do things with my hands, I physically move my body to do work. Your cytoskeleton responds to that mechanosensation. Your body responds to the molecules that it's getting, and it adapts to it. So if you don't have a stressor, the cells don't know that it needs to adapt to that. And the reason that exercise is so incredibly important is because the cell has a multitude of cytoskeleton-dependent processes. DNA damage repair requires the cytoskeleton to pull the DNA aside, to fix it, and to put it back. The mitochondria requires proper cytoskeleton functioning to export those precursors or to pull things in. The cell, to communicate to itself, needs the cytoskeleton. Most people have seen that video where you've got this long polymer, which is a microtubule, and then you've got this little thing with two legs, and it's pulling this big sphere behind it, right?
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's a motor protein, that's dynein, or kinesin, depending on the direction it's going, and it's pulling a big vesicle. That vesicle is a big bag of fat that's got stuff on the inside, and it's either taking it from the nucleus or somewhere in the cell to the membrane, or it's bringing it in from the membrane. And so that's getting nutrients, and it's bringing it into the cell, and it's going to respond accordingly. That microtubule, it's a highway. When you don't exercise and you're stagnant, that microtubule becomes fragmented, and it becomes like neighborhood roads, right? It's a map of New York. It's just everywhere. Think of how long it would take you to get from point A to point B if you had to go through the neighborhood versus just taking the interstate. Exercise increases the efficiency of the cytoskeleton. It allows you to have proper communication with inside the cell, such that when there is inflammatory responses, the firemen can get to the fire quickly. Antioxidants can get to where they're going. Antioxidants are released from one organ, put into the circulatory system, make it to the cell, enter the mitochondria, put out the fire. They're your firemen. The same with vitamin C and other antioxidants. If the road's jacked up, if there's construction everywhere, it's not going to be able to operate effectively. If you have constant inflammation, you're constantly breaking down that highway. You're breaking down those roads. So this is why exercise is so incredibly important to being healthy. Too much exercise isn't giving your body enough time to heal, rest, repair, digest, do the things it needs to do. So there's definitely, a spectrum. Too much here, too much there. But the act of moving, I think, is non-negotiable. You have to exercise. And the more you exercise and the more you eat healthy foods, the more your body's going to be able to communicate with itself, which is going to avoid any disease, right? You now have better DNA repair. You have better intracellular transportation. Your cells are talking to each other. You have lower inflammation. You can deal with repair. You can fight off toxins. If you eat something that can make you sick, you've got some bacteria or virus or parasite that's attempting to take off, and you've got a strong infrastructure, a city that can work together and has good roads, it can fight back effectively. But it seems like the bulk of what's happened in our diet, you look at the 2008 housing bubble, huge crash, and we started building all these new houses. What do the houses look like? Tiny yards.
Yeah.
No porches. Huge place for a TV. No place for storage of food, right? Everything's go out to eat. Go spend your money buying food. I know people who own restaurants, good people, but they're buying things in bulk from places that sell crappy food, right? I'm ecstatic that people are starting to deep fry food in beef tallow, right? Because saturated fat remains saturated fat after you heat it. If it's an oil and you heat it, it can become a trans fat. So, we're not giving you trans fat, but we didn't measure it after we cooked it and fried it, so now it's got trans fat in it. And omega-6 is more prone to becoming trans fat than omega-3. Another reason why seed oils are so bad, or can potentially be bad. But the beef tallow that these restaurants are getting has other things added into it so they can reuse it multiple times. And those additives are detrimental to our health. So it's like they made a step in the right direction, but they're still trying to make an affordable food-based product for us to consume that's competitive. So we still have quite a bit of way to go. And I think if people realize that if you're getting the nutrients and the essentials that you need, you don't need near as much food. You don't feel like you need a snack as often. And now you're not buying as much junk. And every dollar that you spend is an investment into your future, into your kids' future, right? So as long as we keep buying peanut butter with hydrogenated oil in it because it's cheaper, they're going to keep making it. Hydrogenated oil is trans fat, right? It's the worst of the worst. So if you're eating peanut butter with hydrogenated oil, throw that shit out, right? But as soon as we, quit buying that stuff and you're like, oh, now that I fast once a week or even twice a month for a day, the amount of money I'm saving not eating, I can spend a little bit more on that really nice meal that I'm going to get when I do break my fast. Or I've got more money to buy better products because I'm not just filling up my cart with a bunch of stuff, for the people that can do that. And if you start eating those healthier, better for you foods, your taste buds also change.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I used to hate avocados. They were like a fat fruit. It was confusing to my brain. But if you take banana and you peel it and then you chop it and you stick it in the freezer, let it become solid, pull it out. As it starts to melt a little bit, you can whip it and it becomes like ice cream. It has the same consistency as ice cream. And because you froze it and then let it thaw a little bit, it's breaking down those polymers and it makes them sweeter. Well, banana is also a very strong flavor, right? So I would take little bits of avocado and I would throw it into my banana ice cream and put some chocolate chips in there, and then I would eat it. And I did that for about 2 months and slowly increased the amount of avocado, and my taste buds changed. Once I ate avocado again, it didn't taste as bad. I kind of liked it. Today I love it. I open one up and just eat it, olive oil, salt. So your taste buds will change. Like I said, your cells are constantly adapting to the stimuli. There's no brain.
Okay, that was going to be my question, yeah.
They respond to the environment. So if you're eating healthy foods, if you're exercising, you're doing these things, you're lowering your stress, you're increasing oxytocin, then your cells adapt to their environment. And so, yeah, it took some years for people to get to the point that they're at now where they're not feeling healthy or they've got some weight or they're having whatever issues, but you can change the trajectory because your cells don't want to be unhealthy. They just don't have the tools that they need, and communication sucks because that's how the food system's been set up. I was reading recently that the country of Japan is suing the food companies. And in their press release, they said, we know that big tobacco, whose job was to make a very addictive product, bought into the food companies and transferred that knowledge. And now our food is so addictive that we're literally having to sell GLP-1 agonists to make you stop eating the food that we've made so addictive. And so they're like, you guys have made enough money. You did your thing. It's time to phase that out. People are sick. There's too many people on the planet. We were arguing that we were going to have too many people, so we had to start genetically modifying all these foods, but the only thing we modified was corn syrup, was carbohydrates, right? And then we started feeding all that to the animals. Now the animals don't have the foods and the stuff they need, but they weigh more, so they can sell them for more, but that doesn't mean they're more nutrient dense. And so like regenerative farming, like cows eat grass. How much protein do you think is in grass?
Probably next to none.
Yeah, so where do they get their protein from?
That's a great question.
Yeah, there's a lot of bacteria in the soil.
Oh, okay.
Cows are literally eating probiotics and turning that into meat. That's the greenest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And I had a whole chunk of my life where I was phasing out red meat, pork, all the stuff, going more plant-based, just eating fish because I thought red meat and eggs and cholesterol, because that's what the literature was saying. As a scientist, I'm looking into the literature and I'm trying to understand how these things work. And now I'm realizing that it was just a complete ploy and it was a lie. Cholesterol and saturated fat are not bad. They're essential for functioning and for survival. And there's no essential carbohydrate, so I don't need more corn. I need more food. So after incorporating steak back in and then like working for the national lab, you know, we were like, CO2 is bad, climate change, global warming, like we need to do all this research with seaweed and bacteria and all this stuff to help pull CO2 out. And cows, they're farting, it's bad. We got to do all this stuff to fight off the cows. And I'm like, wait, cows are grazing on the grass. And as long as they're going in a circle or, you know, between different patches, then they're fertilizing the grass and they're creating more nutrients and more bacteria. So then when they eat the bacteria, they're creating greater diversity and they're building themselves with a better product than the last time they were on that same crop. So it's actually better, and because the grass is healthier and the soil's healthier, it grows faster, so it pulls more CO2 out into the soil. But if you just have cows on one plot and there's no grass because they've trampled it all and you don't move them and you just feed them corn, then yeah, they're not pulling CO2 out anymore and they're becoming a problem. But if you just let nature do what it wants to do and, you know, it just kind of solves its own problem.
Yeah.
So it's really just the way that we're doing it as humans is detrimental. If you want to argue that the changes that we're seeing in the climate are good or bad, that's a whole different topic, right? So yeah, I think that's one of the most valuable things that any person can do is I wouldn't trust anyone or anything as far as like science goes without looking more into it, right? And that's what us scientists do, is we're critical about everything. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I started pulling certain things out of my diet. And then I realized this doesn't make sense with how biology actually functions at the cell. But when you talk to doctors and you talk to nutritionists, they're like, nope, you need more plant, you need more fiber, you need more diversity, you need more of this. And it's like, yes, but where's your gold medalist that only ate plants or only ate meat? They don't exist. The body needs combinations of both stuff. And there's a lot of value for adding all of that together in the right ways, right? Culturally rich foods kept cultures alive long enough to become a culture, right? So there's some science to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, our time is kind of coming to a close here, but before we wrap up, I guess if we could just jump back onto some things and kind of go over a brief summary of what we talked about, what would you say are some of the highlights from this discussion that you would, in a very simplified manner, want to put out to the general public that's easy and digestible?
Yeah. First one is movement is non-negotiable, right? So whether it's exercise, jumping, bouncing, just move your body. You can do some push-ups. You can find some weights while you're watching TV. You can do something. Movement's incredibly necessary and incredibly supportive of all facets of health. The order that you eat your food matters, right? So fibers, proteins, then carbohydrates. If you're consuming carbohydrates, it's best to also saturate them with fats. Olive oil is probably the best. I only cook with butter, ghee, beef tallow, or coconut oil, so saturated fats, because they can't become trans fat, they can't become rancid. And then I add on my olive oil afterwards. But I still eat a lot of fat. I eat a lot of avocados and nuts and seeds and butters and stuff like that. So the other takeaway is there's essential amino acids, essential fatty acids, and minerals. There's no essential carbohydrate. So you don't need carbohydrates. Your body can make everything it needs from fats and proteins. The value of carbohydrate-rich sources is most of them are plants that contain polyphenols and other compounds that can help stimulate the gut bacteria or your own cells to mitigate problems that can come with eating higher amounts of fat or protein. So back to the idea of, rosemary and cilantro and those plants that can help mitigate, heavy metals or the carcinogens or things like that. Definitely season your food like Italian seasoning, like oregano and all, like basil and thyme. They have so much health benefit. So try to get more of that into your diet. And then when you eat your food, it's a very intensive process. Your body has a lot of steps it has to go through. So the more that you can be in a calm, rested state, you can hum, you can just be relaxed, you can laugh.
Throw some water on your face.
Right? This idea of you're calming down, you can do some body weight squats, so you're communicating to your body what to do next. The more of that you can integrate into each meal, the less your body's going to think it needs to store everything as fat. And then if you're exercising first, it now knows that it can put more of that into the muscle and muscle-like tissue. It can store it as glycogen or brown fat, which is typically around your muscles that move quickly. And then eat foods that have mitochondria in it, right? Mitochondria-rich foods, or find a supplement that has mitochondrial support, right? I have one that's my favorite. I've got a video on it. It's these little packets. It's got glutathione and resveratrol and acai and coenzyme Q and PQQ and all these mitochondrial supportive compounds, right? If the mitochondria is happy, it's more resilient to all the stresses. Mitochondria-rich foods, bone broths, don't cook with oils, eat your food in the right order, move around. After any sort of intense exercise, or even big meal, find some oxytocin, right? Not dopamine from scrolling, right?
Connection,
yeah.
Connection and rest.
Connection and rest help get rid of that final visceral fat, which is an area that a lot of people feel insecure about, and it's that last bit that just won't go away. And you can't run it off. It's psychological, right? You've got to calm down, and you've got to tell your body it's okay to get rid of it. I'm going to feed you later. You treat it like a toddler, right? You got to kind of baby it through. That's the biggest takeaway. I do nutritional coaching, so it's biochemistry of the cell with nutrition in mind, whether that's for physique bodybuilding, whether that's for strongman, whether that's for mitigating disease, losing weight, or just base accountability of hey, I want to learn some stuff and just make this next year better. I have a company called Helix Prime Nutrition, and those are all services I offer. I have a whole career. I am a scientist, so I'm doing this because the world, I can see how I can influence its growth, and that matters to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to make a ton of money off of it. Oftentimes I say, what will it cost for you to be uncomfortable enough to stick to the new things that you're learning, right? What's going to make you uncomfortable enough that you're going to remain accountable to the things that you would like to change and grow and do, and that's the amount I'm going to charge, right? And that's different for anybody, but it's enough to make meaningful difference. And because it's just me, I can't take 1,000 clients. So I'm looking for real, meaningful change. I'm not just trying to get some automated service where you send some word in the comment and then I respond with something and then bombard you with emails. Like, that shit's annoying.
Right. Yeah.
I'm trying to make meaningful change, because the more that people learn, the more they can share that, and the more that the culture can change. And so, yeah, if you want to know more, reach out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of the things that you mentioned will be written in summary or linked in the biography. I don't know.
I'll write up. You can.
This is my first time.
So I have on my socials. I have links. It's a dot cards, DOT.CARDS / Sabo the scientist, SABO, and that has access to all of my
Perfect.
My phone number, my socials, a calendar where you can book time. So that's got everything on it. So I'll put that in the link to this video. And then, based on the number of people that show up for me to help, like, that's how quick I'll get back to everybody, because it's just me. This is awesome. Thanks for hanging out. I'm glad that, that day in the gym, you just walked up and you're like, whoa, what is that? What are you doing? That's awesome. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. And then we just got to talking, and then now here we are, whole podcast style, just helping the world become a better place. So thanks, Jordan.
Well,
Appreciate
Jeremy, you've always been very people-centered, and you're really good with people. And I'm just grateful that you asked me to tag along on this. So
yeah, absolutely. And then shout out to our Jordan, our other Jordan. What's your last name?
Green Lake Color.
Green Length Color? Okay, yeah. He's the one that set up all the lights and all this other awesomeness. So shout out to him. We've got 2 Jordans and a Jeremy. And so Triple J.
Triple J.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.